Jane, thank you very much indeed. It is 8:10. Stripped of his titles, evicted from his house, banished from public life. Is this the end of the story for the man previously known as Prince Andrew? Or will the King's unprecedented move to force his younger brother to live in a form of internal exile still not be enough to stop the questions? Questions from Parliament, questions from the United States Congress, questions from the police about Andrew's relationship with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, about his own treatment of young women, and about his finances. Where on earth did all that money come from? The King's decision is so dramatic, it is easy to forget quite how long this drama has been running. It is almost a quarter of a century since Andrew first met Virginia Roberts-Giuffre. She consistently claimed that she was forced to have sex with him on 3 occasions, claims he's always denied. It is 17 years since Jeffrey Epstein was jailed for sex offences. 15 years since Andrew was photographed with Epstein after his release strolling in New York's Central Park. A decade since Buckingham Palace denied that Andrew had committed any impropriety after he was named in US court documents related to Epstein. And yes, it is 6 years since Prince Andrew, as he then was, and never will be again, spoke to Emily Maitlis on BBC Newsnight in an effort to rescue his reputation.
Do I regret the fact that he has quite obviously conducted himself in a manner unbecoming? Yes.
Unbecoming? He was a sex offender.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm being polite, in the sense that he was a sex offender. The problem was the fact that once he had been convicted,
you stayed with him.
I stayed with him, and that's the bit that as it were, I kick myself for on a daily basis, because it was not something that was becoming of a member of the royal family. And we try and uphold the highest standards and practices, and I let the side down. Simple as that.
I let the side down. What changed this year is that Virginia Roberts-Giuffre took her own life. In her posthumous memoir, Nobody's Girl, she repeated those allegations that she had had sex with Prince Andrew on 3 separate occasions. Last night on Newsnight, the programme chosen by Andrew to try and rescue his reputation, but which had helped to destroy it. The programme spoke to the brother of Virginia, Sky Roberts. He hailed the actions of the King as a victory after death for his sister.
It's not enough. We have to have some sort of investigation that goes further into this. I mean, he's still walking around a free man. I commend the King. I think he's doing an amazing job as a world leader, setting a precedent, but we need to take it one more step further. He needs to be behind bars, period.
One more step further. Let's discuss that with the former BBC presenter Jonathan Dimbleby, friend, confidant, biographer of King Charles, and also with David Yelland, former editor of the Sun newspaper and presenter of the BBC podcast When It Hits the Fan. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Jonathan, just as I went through that timeline, and there are many, many other stages, as you know, it has been an awfully long time coming. What, in your view, changed?
I think it's a culmination. You described some of the processes. This, as he now is, no longer a prince, arrogant, boorish, entitled, an embarrassment for a long time to the institution of the monarchy and to the King. I think that that today he will be feeling a measure of relief that after going through due process, constitutionally, legally, being in touch with his family, making sure to keep in touch with number 10, that he has made this decision, his own personal decision, a very big decision, as you've identified, and hope that for him and for the monarchy, it will now go away, although it won't, of course, for Andrew. I think the culmination of a whole series of things, and particularly towards the end, the revelations in Virginia Giuffre's posthumous biography, that he had clearly lied. You know, in New York, you mentioned it, when he was with Epstein strolling, he said that he'd gone there to break with him. He was lying. He did not break with him. He continued the relationship. And I think that was the culminating factor. And I'd add one thing, that the king and the queen's immense sympathy for those people who have been abused came through intensely in that statement. And I think and hope that he will now be given a measure of relief from the focus being on him, who does important public work, and insofar as he continues, will be on the person who has been effectively banished to the private estate at Sandringham.
You say that he hopes, and you hope as a friend of his and an admirer of the supporter of the monarchy, that in a sense this separates Andrew's fate from the future of the monarchy. Do you think the king came to the view that without this separation, there was a threat to the institution itself?
I think he was well aware that it was chipping away constantly. And I'll give you a couple of examples, recent examples. He went to the Vatican, as Supreme Governor of the Church of England, a really important constitutional and for him spiritual moment to pray with the Pope, first time in 500 years. What was on the front pages? Andrew. The LGBT plus memorial, which he visited, way down his story, up at the top was Andrew. That's a distraction. I don't think he cares about it for his own sake. You know, he's well past that. He cares about it because that is what damages a perception of an institution for which he cares and for which he does everything that he possibly can.
But why, some are still arguing, why did it take the monarchy? Of course, it was not King Charles himself. He was not the monarch at the time. So long to deal with this, when it was blindingly obvious that Andrew was lying about his relationship with Epstein and also with Virginia Giuffre, and it had been obvious for years.
Well, you might say that, and I might say that, and I do say that. However, he has to go through the monarchy. The institution has to go through due process. It has to, if the man was saying and still says, I'm innocent of any offence, and he as the head of state and she, the Queen beforehand as head of state, jumped from the allegation to the conclusion that by inference they supported the view that he was guilty, that would, from their perspective, and I think from the perspective of a constitutional lawyer, would be an inappropriate ground for denying him the status that he has. And as you've identified correctly, of course, this is a huge step that has been taken.
Spell out why so huge, Jonathan, because there are some people listening this morning who think it's an obvious step, a step only taken in response to opinion polls and pressure from MPs who are getting closer and closer to what has happened.
It is a huge step constitutionally. I understand those sentiments. It's a natural sentiment to have. Well, of course he should get rid of that title. Of course he should no longer have been a duke. Of course he should no longer be prince. Of course he should be out of the scene. But our constitution, our way of government, our way of governance, and he's at the apex of it all, does not work like that. And you can't just impetuously say, if you're the king, and I have no doubt at all that he has been consistently embarrassed and frustrated by and angry about the way in which his brother has behaved. At the same time, he is a brother. He has to be mindful of that person. And I suspect, I don't know, I have no idea, but I imagine even Prince Andrew now, humiliated and broken, is in need of some degree of care. And I think that the king was bound to take into account, he doesn't act, as I say, impetuously. He considers, he decides, this is what has to be done. It's major in constitutional terms because you tell me the last time that a prince that his entitlement to be a prince was removed from him.
But final thought, Jonathan, if I may, before turning to David Yelland, I think what you're capturing is it was major not just constitutionally, but personally. And that alongside that relief that you describe, may be a good deal of anguish for King Charles too.
Yeah, I would say this. If this wasn't stressful, he's a human being. Nothing would be stressful. He has enough stresses in any case. As we know, has undergone treatment for a cancer. That is stressful enough. And it's my personal hope. I hope that we will think kindly of him, that we will give him support now that he has done this and will continue to do his very important public role.
Jonathan Dimbleby, thank you very much indeed. We're listening to that David Yelland, presenter of When It Hits the Fan, which looks at how stories of these sorts play out. And you remember your time as a tabloid editor, it's quite a long time ago. Will Jonathan get his hope, do you think?
I think he will. I think that when the king goes about his daily business today or whenever, I don't know what his diary is, he will be cheered. I think people will applaud. And I think when we saw BBC Question Time last night and the audience being told the news, you could see where the public are. And I think, I'll come on to the future in a minute. I think the last few weeks, the palace have been tone deaf. They have been behind the public. As Jonathan says, the public had already made their mind up. And they have passed through moments of great jeopardy. However, and it can't have been easy for them, for the king or for his advisors. However, this statement is of a historic nature. It is one of the best statements I've ever seen from anywhere, any organisation.
Just spell out why, David, because it's not a long statement.
Well,
it's factual to begin with.
Yeah.
I'll start it. His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and honours of Prince Andrew. But what does it go on and say that you think makes it special?
Well, first of all, short is good. Most importantly, it has compassion. The first statement, which is just 2 weeks ago tomorrow, had no compassion in it. They handed the mic, if you like, the power to Prince Andrew, or Andrew as we would now call him, and we had this artifice that he was giving up his title. He would no longer use his titles. Now, the king has taken command, and the reason the public will support him so much, and this is such a deep feeling in the country, is we can see that this decision is at huge personal cost to the king. And I also think a great chasm has developed, a great sort of wall has developed down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Because on this side of the Atlantic, we have a Prime Minister who got rid of the ambassador to Washington because of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And we now have a head of state, the king, who at great cost to himself has done what he's done to his brother. On the other side of the Atlantic, they are in denial, and the most powerful people in the country are involved. And I have to say, I don't wrap myself in the flag at all. I used to edit The Sun, but I'm not that kind of person. But the first emotion I felt this morning, Nick, when I woke up was, I feel quite proud to be British this morning because of this statement.
But there'll be other people, and maybe perhaps younger people,
yes,
who say that what has been revealed by that extraordinary timeline, I had to remind myself
absolutely
quite how long this had been going on, and say what we've discovered is that the royal family are not special. They're capable of the most appalling behaviour.
Yes.
They cover up. They can't be trusted to sort it out for themselves. We need to change the relationship between the governed and the monarchy forever, they might argue.
Some people will argue that, and it's certainly a moment of great jeopardy. And we're going into a period now which is very unpredictable. We're in a sort of post-abdication period in terms of PR, if you like. Andrew will still be around. He'll be of huge interest to the media. So will Sarah Ferguson. Sarah Ferguson has her own PR people, and she has been left out a lot of this. And some people will feel very sorry for Sarah Ferguson. And I also heard what Jonathan Dimbleby said about Andrew. I hope that people are caring for him as well, because everybody deserves that care. Now, to answer your question, yes, Gen Z, they've already lost the argument in that generation. And this doesn't just look terrible, it is terrible. Going back to BBC Question Time last night, I watched the images a couple of times when the news was broken. There's a woman in the foreground with this purple top on, and she just mouths the word, a young woman, she mouths the word, wow. And she can't even speak, because this is the reason this is so powerful, Nick. This is the powerful speaking out on behalf of the powerless. And that so rarely happens. And it is, I'm sure, driven not just by the King, but also by the Queen. And it is interesting, it says, their Majesties. And I think, and I've said this...
Just to finish the sentence, people who don't know it, David, and then we've got to wind up, but their Majesties, it says at the end of the statement, wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse.
Very, very, very powerful. And I predict a couple of things. One of the things that he'll be cheered. The other thing is the Giuffre family, I think, will be asked into the palace at some point. I think Camilla the Queen will meet the family. I said that 3 weeks ago and people thought I was completely nuts. But I think that's a natural end to this. And I do think they've drawn a line now. And I do think we will begin to move away from it in a couple of weeks. I think this will work. And I take my hat off to the team in the palace. It cannot have been easy.
David Yelland, presenter of When It Hits the Fan. You know where to get it. BBC Sounds. Jonathan Dimbleby earlier. Thank you very much indeed.